It was a bright Monday morning, and Ayana Green was sitting in the small, neatly organized living room of her modest apartment. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air as sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow over her surroundings. Ayana, a determined and hard-working woman in her early 30s, had spent the past few weeks preparing for significant life change. She had finally landed her dream job as a community outreach coordinator for a non-profit organization, a role that would allow her to make a real difference in the lives of others. However, there was one last hurdle to clear: securing health insurance. Ayana had recently been diagnosed with a treatable but chronic condition that required regular checkups and medication. It wasn't something she could ignore, and she was determined to find a health plan that covered her needs without breaking the bank. Sitting at her desk, Ayana carefully reviewed the health insurance options she'd found online. The glossy brochures were filled with promises of comprehensive care and affordable plans, but she had learned to read between the lines. Years of navigating a system that seemed designed to work against her had taught Ayana the importance of vigilance. She finally settled on a well-known insurance provider, one that advertised itself as being dedicated to inclusivity and equal access. With a mix of hope and apprehension, she dialed their customer service number. "Thank you for calling Pinnacle Health Insurance," the cheery voice on the other end said. "How can I assist you today?" Ayana explained her situation, detailing her medical history and the type of coverage she needed. The representative assured her that everything sounded straightforward and that they would process her application promptly. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel a sense of relief. It seemed like things were finally falling into place. But then the tone shifted. A week later, Ayana received an email notifying her that her application had been denied. Confused, she called the company for clarification. This time, the representative's voice was less welcoming. They claimed her condition was considered high risk and therefore excluded under their policy. Ayana knew this wasn't entirely true. Federal regulations protected against such exclusions for pre-existing conditions. When she pointed this out, the representative stumbled over their words before redirecting her to a supervisor. The conversation with the supervisor was worse. Their tone was condescending, their explanations vague. Ayana couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to their refusal. The final straw came when she overheard someone in the background mutter something that sounded like, "Why does she even bother?" Her chest tightened. The words were barely audible, but they were enough to confirm what she'd suspected all along. This wasn't about her medical history. It was about her. Her name, her voice, and what they assumed about her life. Ayana hung up the phone, her hands trembling with a mix of anger and frustration. She stared at the rejection email on her computer screen, the corporate jargon mocking her efforts. She had always believed in standing up for what was right, but this felt like an insurmountable battle. Still, Ayana knew she couldn't let it end here. She wouldn't allow them to brush her aside, as if her health and her life didn't matter. With a deep breath, Ayana began researching her legal rights. She reached out to advocacy groups and forums where others shared similar experiences. Each story she read fueled her resolve. She realized that this wasn't just about her. It was about a system that seemed to discriminate against people who looked like her, people who were often left to fend for themselves. As she dug deeper, Ayana uncovered unsettling patterns in the insurance company's practices. Complaints from other black women, denied coverage despite meeting all requirements, began to emerge. It wasn't long before Ayana decided she wouldn't fight this battle alone. She was going to make her voice heard, and she wasn't afraid of what it might take to do so. The next steps were clear, but they wouldn't be easy. Ayana began drafting letters to local media outlets, documenting every interaction she had with the insurance company. She reached out to community leaders, hoping to bring attention to the issue. She knew she was up against a powerful corporation with endless resources, but Ayana also knew the strength of her community and the power of persistence. Just when she thought she was making headway, an unexpected phone call shook things up. A mysterious whistleblower from inside Pinnacle Health Insurance reached out, offering critical information that could expose the company's discriminatory practices. Ayana listened intently, her heart racing as the pieces began to fall into place. She realized that this fight wasn't just about health insurance. It was about justice. The stakes had never been higher. Ayana was about to embark on a journey that would test her courage and resilience like never before. What she didn't know was that her actions would spark a chain of events that would leave everyone, including Pinnacle Health Insurance, questioning the cost of underestimating her determination. Ayana sat at her desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The whistleblower's words replayed in her mind, each detail more unsettling than the last. The anonymous caller claimed to have worked at Pinnacle Health Insurance for over a decade, and knew firsthand about internal policies designed to make it harder for certain groups of people to qualify for coverage. It wasn't just about rejecting applications. It was about creating an endless maze of bureaucracy that wore people down until they gave up. Ayana's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on her door. Her best friend, Nia, stood in the hallway, holding a bag of takeout and wearing her usual warm smile. Nia had been Ayana's rock through countless challenges, and tonight, her presence was more comforting than ever. "Figured you might need a little break," Nia said, setting the bag on the kitchen counter. "You've been holed up in here all day. What's going on?" Ayana hesitated for a moment before launching into the story. She told Nia about the rejection, the condescending tone of the supervisor, and the whistleblower's shocking revelations. Nia listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to anger as the details unfolded. "That's outrageous," Nia said, her voice firm. "You can't let them get away with this. They're counting on you to back down. But I know you, Ayana. You're not the type to roll over." Ayana nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Nia was right. Giving up wasn't in her nature. Still, the weight of the situation felt overwhelming. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was standing up for everyone who had been dismissed, ignored, or mistreated by a system that claimed to be fair. The two women spent the evening brainstorming. Nia suggested reaching out to a local journalist she knew, someone who had a reputation for exposing corporate misconduct. Ayana agreed, and they drafted a compelling email detailing her experience and the whistleblower's allegations. By the time Nia left, Ayana felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't alone in this fight, and that made all the difference. The next morning, Ayana received a response from the journalist, a sharp-witted woman named Simone Phillips. Simone was intrigued by Ayana's story and agreed to meet later that week. In the meantime, Ayana continued gathering evidence. She combed through the online forums, connecting with other individuals who had faced similar issues with Pinnacle. Their stories were heartbreakingly familiar. Denials based on vague technicalities, dismissive customer service, and the same sense of being targeted for reasons that had nothing to do with health. As Ayana pieced together the puzzle, she began to see a pattern. The individuals most affected by these practices were disproportionately people of color, single mothers, and individuals with lower incomes. It was as if the company had created an unwritten rule book, one designed to protect their profits at the expense of the most vulnerable. The meeting with Simone took place in a bustling coffee shop downtown. Ayana arrived early, clutching a folder filled with printouts and notes. When Simone walked in, Ayana was struck by her commanding presence. Simone was the kind of person who exuded confidence, her sharp eyes scanning the room as if she could uncover a secret with a single glance. They ordered their drinks and found a quiet corner. Ayana wasted no time diving into her story, laying out the timeline of events and sharing the whistleblower's claims. Simone listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes in her leather-bound notebook. When Ayana finished, Simone leaned back in her chair, her expression serious. "This is big," Simone said, "but it's also going to be a tough fight. Corporations like Pinnacle have deep pockets and powerful legal teams. They'll do everything they can to discredit you and bury the story." Ayana nodded. She had expected as much. "I'm not afraid," she said. "I just want the truth to come out." Simone smiled, a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. "I like your spirit. Let me do some digging on my end. If what you're saying checks out, you might have a story that can't be ignored. The days that followed were a blur of phone calls, emails, and late nights spent reviewing documents. Ayana felt a growing sense of urgency as more pieces of the puzzle came together. Simone uncovered internal memos that hinted at discriminatory practices, and Ayana's network of contacts continued to expand. Each new piece of evidence strengthened her resolve, but it also deepened the mystery. Why was Pinnacle so determined to deny coverage to certain groups? And who else within the company was complicit? One evening, Ayana received another call from the whistleblower. This time, their tone was more urgent. They revealed that Pinnacle was aware of Ayana's actions and was preparing a counter-narrative to discredit her. The whistleblower warned Ayana to be cautious, advising her to document everything and avoid sharing sensitive information with anyone she didn't trust completely. The warning sent a chill down Ayana's spine, but it also fueled her determination. She knew she was walking a fine line, but the thought of backing down was unthinkable. She reminded herself why she was doing this, not just for herself, but for everyone who had been silenced or ignored. As the tension mounted, Ayana began to notice small, unsettling changes. A black car idled outside her apartment for hours one afternoon. Her phone buzzed with calls from unknown numbers, and when she answered, the line was silent. She brushed it off as paranoia at first, but Nia wasn't so sure. "You need to be careful," Nia said during one of their nightly phone calls. "If they're really trying to stop you, they'll use every trick in the book." Ayana promised to be vigilant, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. Instead, she doubled down on her efforts, working with Simone to prepare for the next phase of their plan. The goal was clear: to expose Pinnacle Health Insurance for what they truly were, and to hold them accountable for the harm they had caused. As Ayana sat at her desk late one night, surrounded by stacks of papers and her glowing laptop screen, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the verge of something monumental. The pieces were falling into place, but the full picture was still just out of reach. She knew the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she also knew one thing for certain: she was ready to face whatever came next. What Ayana didn't realize was that the next chapter of her fight would bring revelations she could never have anticipated, and the stakes would become higher than she ever imagined. The battle for justice was only just beginning. As the days went by, Ayana found herself consumed by the fight against Pinnacle Health Insurance. Every waking moment was spent digging through records, connecting with people who had similar experiences, and strategizing with Simone. Her once peaceful apartment had turned into a command center, with files scattered across the living room and sticky notes plastered on the walls. Despite the chaos, Ayana felt more focused than ever. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about exposing a system that thrived on injustice. One evening, Ayana received an email from a woman named Carla, who had stumbled across Ayana's story through an online forum. Carla, a single mother of two, shared a gut-wrenching account of being denied coverage for her son's life-saving medication. The reason Pinnacle provided was as vague as it was cruel, citing a supposed technical error that persisted for months. By the time the issue was resolved, Carla had racked up thousands of dollars in medical debt. Ayana called Carla immediately. Their conversation lasted for hours as Carla poured her heart out, detailing the sleepless nights and impossible decisions she had faced. By the end of the call, Ayana felt an even greater sense of urgency. Carla's story wasn't unique. It was part of a larger pattern that Ayana was beginning to understand all too well. Simone, meanwhile, had been making progress on her end. She had managed to secure a meeting with an insider at Pinnacle, someone who could provide critical information about the company's internal practices. The meeting was set to take place in a secluded diner on the outskirts of the city. Ayana insisted on coming along, despite Simone's initial hesitation. The diner was nearly empty when they arrived. The insider, a middle-aged man with a nervous demeanor, sat in a booth near the back, fidgeting with his coffee cup. He introduced himself as Marcus and quickly got to the point. Marcus had worked in Pinnacle's claims department for years, and he had seen firsthand how the company manipulated its policies to maximize profits. They have algorithms that flag certain applications, Marcus explained, his voice barely above a whisper. It's all about risk management. They won't outright admit it, but the system is designed to weed out people they think will cost too much. Single mothers, people with chronic conditions, minorities. They call it optimizing resources. But we all know what it really means. Ayana felt a surge of anger as she listened. The deliberate nature of Pinnacle's actions was more insidious than she had imagined. Marcus went on to describe how employees were trained to deflect complaints and how the company relied on the complexity of the healthcare system to discourage people from fighting back. When the meeting ended, Simone assured Marcus that his identity would be protected. As they left the diner, Ayana couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and determination. Marcus's testimony was a game-changer, but it also highlighted just how deep the problem went. Back home, Ayana and Simone worked late into the night, compiling the evidence they had gathered. Simone planned to publish a series of articles exposing Pinnacle's practices, starting with Ayana's story. They knew the company would fight back, but they were prepared for the backlash. Meanwhile, Pinnacle was already making moves. Ayana's whistleblower contact warned her that the company had hired a public relations firm to manage the situation. They were crafting a narrative that painted Ayana as a disgruntled customer with a personal vendetta. The whistleblower also hinted at internal discussions about potential legal action to silence Ayana and Simone. The pressure was mounting, but Ayana refused to back down. Her resolve only deepened when she received an unexpected message from a former employee of Pinnacle. The message included a confidential document outlining the company's risk assessment strategies. Ayana and Simone pored over the document, which confirmed many of Marcus's claims and revealed even more disturbing details. The company had created profiles based on demographics, assigning risk levels that directly influenced the likelihood of an application being approved. As Ayana delved deeper, she began to see how far-reaching Pinnacle's influence was. The company had ties to lobbying groups that pushed for policies favoring insurance providers at the expense of consumers. They had cultivated relationships with key politicians, ensuring that regulations remained lax. Ayana realized that exposing Pinnacle wasn't just about revealing their practices. It was about challenging a system that allowed such practices to thrive. Amid all this, Ayana's personal life began to feel a strain. Naya, ever supportive, tried to keep Ayana grounded, but the weight of the fight was taking its toll. Ayana's parents, who lived out of state, called frequently to check on her, worried about the risks she was taking. Ayana reassured them as best as she could, but she knew there was no turning back. One night, as Ayana was reviewing her notes, she noticed something strange. A few of her files had been moved, and her computer's search history showed queries she hadn't made. Panic set in as she realized her laptop might have been hacked. She called Simone, who urged her to contact a cybersecurity expert immediately. The expert confirmed Ayana's fears. Her computer had been compromised. It was a sophisticated breach, likely the work of professionals. Ayana couldn't prove Pinnacle was behind it, but the timing was too coincidental to ignore. The incident served as a stark reminder of the lengths the company was willing to go to protect itself. Despite the setbacks, Ayana pressed on. She knew the risks were growing, but she also knew that giving up wasn't an option. Each new piece of evidence, each story shared by someone who had been wronged, added fuel to her fire. The fight against Pinnacle had become more than a battle for justice. It was a mission to bring about real change. As the weeks went by, Ayana and Simone finalized their plan to release the first article. The story was ready, the evidence was solid, and the public needed to know the truth. But as the publication date approached, Ayana couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was far from over. Pinnacle was a giant, and she was just one person standing in its shadow. Still, Ayana knew that sometimes even a small spark could ignite a revolution. The tension hung in the air, thick and unrelenting, as Ayana prepared for what was to come. She had no idea how the next chapter of her journey would unfold, but one thing was certain: the fight was only just beginning. The night before the article was set to publish, Ayana sat in her dimly lit apartment, the glow of her laptop illuminating her focused expression. Simone had sent over the final draft of the story, a detailed expose on Pinnacle Health Insurance's discriminatory practices. It was everything Ayana had hoped for: raw, powerful, and undeniable. But as she read through the piece one last time, an uneasy feeling crept over her. The stakes were higher than ever, and Ayana knew this was the point of no return. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking her concentration. It was Nia. Ayana answered quickly, grateful for the distraction. "You okay?" Nia asked, her voice tinged with concern. "I've been thinking about you all day." "I'm fine," Ayana replied, though her tone betrayed her nervousness. "The article goes live tomorrow. It feels like everything is riding on this." Nia's voice softened. "You've done everything you can to prepare. Whatever happens, you're not alone in this." Ayana thanked her friend and hung up, feeling a bit steadier. But the weight of what was coming still pressed down on her. Pinnacle wasn't going to let this go without a fight. She couldn't shake the feeling that they had something up their sleeve, some countermeasure she hadn't anticipated. The next morning, Ayana woke early. She refreshed Simone's news website repeatedly, her heart pounding as the minutes ticked by. Finally, the article appeared. The headline was bold and unflinching, calling out Pinnacle Health Insurance for their discriminatory practices and systemic exploitation. Ayana's name was prominently featured as the whistleblower who had brought the issue to light. Within hours, the story went viral. Social media exploded with reactions, many of them expressing outrage and solidarity. People from all over the country shared their own stories of being mistreated by Pinnacle and other insurance companies. The hashtag Justice for Ayana began trending, and public pressure mounted rapidly. But Ayana's sense of victory was short-lived. By midday, Pinnacle released a public statement denying the allegations. They called the article sensationalist and accused Ayana of spreading misinformation. The statement also included thinly veiled threats of legal action against both Ayana and Simone's publication. Ayana's phone rang constantly, reporters and strangers alike clamoring for comments. Her email inbox was flooded with messages, some supportive, others filled with vitriol. She ignored most of them, focusing instead on the growing list of people who had come forward with similar experiences. Each new story added fuel to the fire, making it clear that Pinnacle's actions were part of a larger systemic problem. Simone called in the afternoon, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to be ready for anything," she said. "I've heard from a source that Pinnacle is planning a major press conference tomorrow. They're going to try to spin this in their favor." Ayana felt a knot form in her stomach. "What do we do?" she asked. "We keep pushing," Simone replied. "I'm already working on a follow-up piece. If they want to play this game, we'll hit them with more facts than they can handle." That evening, Ayana received an unexpected visitor. Marcus, the former Pinnacle employee who had provided critical information, showed up at her door. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder as if he expected to be followed. "I need to show you something," he said, stepping inside quickly. Marcus handed Ayana a USB drive, his hands shaking slightly. "This is everything," he said. "Internal emails, meeting notes, policy drafts. It proves they knew exactly what they were doing and how it would affect people like you." Ayana stared at the drive, her mind racing. "Why now?" she asked. "Why are you giving me this?" Marcus hesitated before answering. "Because I've seen what they're capable of," he said. "And because someone needs to stop them." Ayana thanked Marcus and promised to keep his identity safe. After he left, she plugged the drive into her laptop and began combing through the files. What she found was worse than she had imagined. The documents detailed not only the discriminatory policies, but also deliberate efforts to manipulate regulators and suppress complaints. It was a damning trove of evidence that could bring the company to its knees. But as Ayana worked late into the night, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The shadows outside her window seemed to shift unnaturally, and the faint hum of an idling car engine reached her ears. She tried to brush it off as paranoia, but the tension in her chest refused to ease. The next morning, Pinnacle's press conference aired live on television. The CEO, a polished and confident man named Richard Harlow, stood at the podium, flanked by his legal team. He delivered a carefully crafted speech, dismissing the allegations as baseless and accusing Simone's publication of irresponsible journalism. Harlow even went so far as to suggest that Ayanna had fabricated her story for personal gain. Watching from her apartment, Ayanna's hands balled into fists. The lies were infuriating, but she refused to let them intimidate her. Instead, she called Simone and told her about the new evidence Marcus had provided. Simone's voice crackled with excitement over the phone. "This changes everything," she said. "If we can verify these documents, Pinnacle won't have a leg to stand on." As Ayanna and Simone prepared to release the next article, the tension reached a breaking point. Pinnacle's legal team issued a cease and desist letter, demanding that Ayanna and Simone retract their claims or face a lawsuit. Ayanna's whistleblower contact warned her that the company was escalating their efforts to discredit her, and she began to notice more strange occurrences: calls from blocked numbers, suspicious vehicles parked near her apartment, and even a break-in attempt that left her shaken but unharmed. Despite the growing pressure, Ayanna refused to back down. The evidence she held was too important, and the voices of those who had been silenced were too powerful to ignore. As she prepared to release the final piece of the puzzle, she knew that the battle with Pinnacle was about to reach its most critical and dangerous moment yet. The air in Ayanna's apartment was heavy with anticipation. She and Simone were preparing to release the follow-up article, the one that would include the damning evidence from Marcus. As the files were uploaded and the final edits made, Ayanna couldn't help but feel like the walls were closing in. The stakes were already high, but now they felt astronomical. She was going up against a corporate giant with seemingly endless resources, and the idea of what they might do next sent chills down her spine. Just as Simone was about to hit publish, Ayanna's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The number was blocked, but something compelled her to answer. On the other end was a voice she didn't recognize, calm, measured, and unsettlingly confident. "Ms. Ayanna Reed," the voice began, sending a jolt through her. "You're in way over your head." Ayanna's grip tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear creeping in. "That's not important," the voice replied. "What is important is that you understand the consequences of your actions. Pinnacle doesn't take kindly to baseless accusations, and neither do the people who depend on their success." The call ended abruptly, leaving Ayanna shaken but resolute. She relayed the conversation to Simone, who insisted they proceed as planned. "They're bluffing," Simone said, though even she sounded unsure. "They know we have the truth on our side." The article went live that evening. This time, it wasn't just a story. It was a full-blown exposé with documents, internal emails, and testimony from Marcus to back it up. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Social media erupted with calls for accountability, and news outlets picked up the story, amplifying it far beyond what Ayanna and Simone had anticipated. The momentum was undeniable, but so was the danger. The next day, Ayanna received a surprising email from an anonymous source. The message was cryptic, but it hinted at a deeper layer of corruption within Pinnacle. It claimed that the discriminatory practices weren't just about profit margins. They were tied to secret agreements with third-party organizations, including powerful lobbying groups and even government officials. The email included an attachment, a single document that appeared to be an early draft of a contract between Pinnacle and one such group. The implications were staggering, but the document alone wasn't enough to prove anything. Ayanna and Simone debated what to do. Simone was cautious, warning that they needed more evidence before going public with such a claim. But Ayanna couldn't shake the feeling that this was the key to unraveling everything. If they could connect the dots, it would expose not just Pinnacle, but an entire network of corruption that had been operating in the shadows. As they worked to verify the document, Ayanna noticed something strange. Her whistleblower contact, who had been so consistent in their warnings and updates, suddenly went silent. Days passed with no word, and Ayanna's unease grew. She tried reaching out through their usual channels, but there was no response. It was as if they had vanished. The silence was broken when Ayanna received a package at her doorstep. There was no return address, and the handwriting on the label was unfamiliar. Inside was a USB drive, along with a note that read, *4 your eyes only. Trust no one. *. Ayanna's hands trembled as she inserted the drive into her laptop. The files it contained were unlike anything she had seen before. Spreadsheets, meeting transcripts, and even video recordings of high-level executives discussing strategies to manipulate public perception and control regulatory oversight. One video in particular left her breathless. It showed Richard Harlow, Pinnacle's CEO, in a closed-door meeting with a senator, discussing how to neutralize whistleblowers and journalists. As the weight of the new evidence sank in, Ayanna realized the scope of what she was uncovering. This wasn't just about Pinnacle's discriminatory policies. It was a sprawling network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of power. But with this revelation came a terrifying realization. Ayanna wasn't just fighting a corporation anymore. She was taking on a system that would do anything to protect itself. Before Ayanna could process her next steps, her apartment was plunged into darkness. The sudden power outage left her in complete silence, save for the sound of her own breathing. Her heart raced as she grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight. A quick glance out the window confirmed her worst fear. The rest of the building still had power. This wasn't an accident. Simone's name flashed on Ayanna's screen and she answered quickly. "My power just went out," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You need to get out of there," Simone said urgently. "I just got a tip that Pinnacle might be moving against you. This is bigger than we thought. Ayanna, they're not going to stop." Ayanna grabbed her laptop and the USB drive, shoving them into her bag along with a few essentials. As she made her way to the door, she paused, listening for any signs of movement in the hallway. The silence was deafening, and every shadow seemed to shift ominously. When she finally stepped outside, she felt a surge of adrenaline. She didn't know who to trust or where to go, but one thing was clear. The fight was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. Ayanna drove through the quiet city streets, her heart pounding as the events of the night swirled in her mind. She clutched her bag tightly, feeling the weight of the USB drive and the evidence it contained. Simone had arranged for Ayanna to meet at a secure location, an office belonging to a trusted friend who had experience handling high-stakes investigations. As Ayanna navigated through the city, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. A dark SUV had appeared in her rearview mirror several blocks back, matching her turns with eerie precision. She tried to remain calm, taking an unexpected left turn and accelerating slightly. The SUV followed. Ayanna's breath quickened as she realized her suspicions were correct. Whoever was tailing her wasn't going to back off easily. Her mind raced as she thought of a plan. Spotting a crowded gas station up ahead, she pulled in, parking near the entrance. She grabbed her bag and stepped out, blending into the small crowd inside the convenience store. The SUV lingered at the edge of the parking lot before eventually driving off, but Ayanna knew it wasn't over. She arrived at the office shortly after, where Simone and a tech-savvy journalist named Derek were waiting. Derek was already at work, verifying the files from the USB drive. The tension in the room was palpable as they watched him cross-reference the data against public records and previous leaks. Finally, Derek looked up, his expression a mix of disbelief and determination. "This is it," he said. "This is the smoking gun. Not only does it confirm Pinnacle's discriminatory practices, but it also exposes their ties to political figures and lobbying groups. This is going to shake the foundations of their entire operation." Simone wasted no time coordinating with her network of journalists and activists. They planned to release the evidence in waves, ensuring it reached as many people as possible. Ayanna, however, couldn't shake a lingering doubt. The mysterious package, the blackout, the tail. It all felt too calculated, too perfect. It was as if someone wanted her to have this evidence, but why? Her thoughts were interrupted when Derek discovered a hidden folder on the USB drive. Inside were files that pointed to something even more shocking. a plan by Pinnacle to stage a public relations coup. They were working with an external agency to fabricate evidence that would discredit Ayanna and Simone's publication. The plan included doctored videos and forged documents designed to paint Ayanna as a fraud who had manipulated data for personal gain. Ayanna felt her stomach drop. If this plan succeeded, it would not only ruin her credibility, but also undermine the voices of everyone who had come forward. The fight wasn't just about exposing the truth anymore. It was about defending it against an enemy willing to rewrite reality itself. Simone quickly shifted gears. It decided to preempt Pinnacle's move by addressing the potential smear campaign head-on. Ayanna recorded a video message speaking directly to the public. In it, she recounted her journey, the evidence she had uncovered, and the threats she had faced. She ended with a powerful plea. The truth is bigger than me, and it's bigger than any one person. This is about all of us standing up against a system that thrives on silence. Don't let them take this away. The video went live alongside the first wave of evidence. It was raw and heartfelt, and it resonated deeply with viewers. Within hours, it had been shared millions of times, sparking a global conversation about corporate corruption and systemic discrimination. News outlets picked up the story, and public pressure on Pinnacle reached a fever pitch. As Ayanna and Simone watched the events unfold, there was a moment of quiet triumph. But just as they began to feel a sense of relief, Derek's phone buzzed with an alert. A new video had surfaced online, one that claimed to show Ayanna accepting money from a supposed competitor of Pinnacle. The timing was too perfect, and the video itself was a poorly constructed deepfake, but it was enough to sow doubt among some viewers. Ayanna's pulse raced as she saw the comments flood in. Pinnacle's smear campaign was in full swing, and it was gaining traction. Simone acted quickly, releasing a side-by-side analysis of the deepfake and the original footage it had been altered from. Experts weighed in, confirming it as a forgery, but the damage was already done. The narrative was spiraling out of their control. Then came the twist Ayanna hadn't seen coming. Marcus, the insider who had provided crucial evidence, reached out with a bombshell revelation. He had discovered that the USB drive hadn't come from within Pinnacle at all. It had been planted by a rival company looking to bring Pinnacle down. While the evidence on the drive was real, the rival company had its own agenda, and they were willing to use Ayanna as a pawn in their corporate war. Ayanna felt a wave of betrayal and anger. She had put everything on the line, only to realize she was being manipulated. But instead of letting the revelation derail her, she used it as fuel. With Simone's help, she crafted one final statement, exposing not only Pinnacle, but also the rival company's underhanded tactics. The final twist turned the story into a broader indictment of corruption across the entire industry. By the time the dust settled, Pinnacle's CEO had resigned, multiple investigations were underway, and public trust in the healthcare system had reached an all-time low. Ayanna's fight had sparked a movement, one that she hoped would lead to lasting change. As she stood in front of a small group of reporters, addressing the chaos that had unfolded, Ayanna's voice was steady. "This fight wasn't just mine," she said. "It belongs to everyone who believes in fairness and justice. And while we've won this battle, the war is far from over." With those words, Ayanna walked away, knowing that her journey was only just beginning. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Ayanna. Her name was now on the lips of millions, praised by some as a hero and criticized by others as a disruptor. The public fallout from the exposure had sent shockwaves through the healthcare industry, sparking investigations into Pinnacle and other insurance giants. Government officials, once silent on the issue, were now calling for reform, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Ayanna had become an unwilling symbol of resistance, a story a rallying cry for change. Despite the growing attention, Ayanna found herself yearning for normalcy. The constant media coverage and public scrutiny were exhausting. She missed the quiet simplicity of her life before all of this began, before her health became a battleground and her voice a weapon. But as much as she wanted to step away, she knew there was still work to be done. The changes she had fought for were just beginning, and walking away now would feel like leaving the job unfinished. One evening, Ayana met Simone at a quiet cafe away from the prying eyes of reporters. The two women sat across from each other, their laptops and phones temporarily out of sight. For the first time in weeks, they allowed themselves to relax, sharing a laugh over how surreal their lives had become. "You know," Simone said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully, "I think we've done something incredible here. But I also think you need to take a break." Ayana smiled, appreciating her friend's honesty. "I know," she admitted. "It's just hard to step away when there's still so much to fix. What if things go back to the way they were?" "They won't," Simone assured her. "You've started something that can't be undone. People are awake now, and they won't let this be swept under the rug." Ayana nodded, letting Simone's words sink in. She had received countless messages from people who had been inspired by her story, from activists pushing for systemic change to everyday individuals who felt empowered to stand up against injustice. Knowing she had made a difference, even in a small way, gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The investigations into Pinnacle unfolded over the next several months, uncovering layers of corruption and malpractice. Multiple executives faced charges, and the company was forced to restructure its policies under strict government oversight. Meanwhile, the rival company that had tried to manipulate Ayana was also exposed, its reputation tarnished in the wake of its deceit. The healthcare industry as a whole faced unprecedented scrutiny, with new regulations being proposed to ensure transparency and fairness. Through it all, Ayana remained cautious but optimistic. She continued to use her platform to advocate for reform, but she also made time to reconnect with herself. Long walks in the park, evenings spent reading, and visits with friends like Nia helped her find balance amidst the chaos. She even began volunteering with a local organization that supported people navigating healthcare challenges, using her experience to guide others through the system's complexities. One day, Ayana received an invitation to speak at a national conference on healthcare reform. The event would bring together policymakers, activists, and industry leaders to discuss the future of the system. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she wanted to put herself back in the spotlight. But after some reflection, she realized how important it was to share her story. She wanted people to understand the human cost of a broken system and the power of standing up for what's right. On the day of the conference, Ayana stood backstage, her heart pounding with nerves. As the host introduced her, the audience erupted into applause, their support giving her the courage to step onto the stage. She looked out at the sea of faces, taking a deep breath before beginning her speech. "I'm not a politician, a lawyer, or an activist," she started, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm just a woman who was pushed to her limits by a system that's supposed to protect us. My story isn't unique. It's one of thousands, maybe millions of people who've been let down by a system that values profit over people." She spoke about her journey, the challenges she had faced, and the lessons she had learned. She highlighted the importance of accountability, the need for systemic change, and the power of collective action. By the time she finished, the room was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Then, as if on cue, the audience rose to their feet, their applause echoing through the hall. That evening, Ayana sat alone in her hotel room, reflecting on how far she had come. The path had been anything but easy, and there were moments when she had wanted to give up. But she had discovered a strength she didn't know she had, and in doing so, she had sparked a movement that was bigger than herself. As she stared out at the city lights, Ayana allowed herself a rare moment of pride. She didn't know what the future held, but she was no longer afraid. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them with courage and resilience. Her story wasn't just about fighting back. It was about building something better. In the days that followed, Ayana continued her work, not as a crusader or a savior, but as a voice among many. The movement she had helped ignite took on a life of its own, driven by countless others who believed in the same vision of justice and fairness. And though her role eventually became smaller, her impact remained, a testament to the power of truth, determination, and the unyielding spirit of one woman who refused to stay silent.